together and calling.
Two voices together,
questioning,
blending,
belonging in this far, quiet, Arctic world.
Olaus and Mardy Murie had a passion for wilderness.
And a heart responsive to its beauty.
They felt connected to the wilderness in body and in spirit.
They treasured each moment.
Whether the discovery of the ptarmigan nest,
or a shed caribou antler on the tundra.
But above all, they emphasized the spiritual value of wilderness.
It is the 1950s, post-World War II America.
Here in America, we were experiencing the most rapid economic industrial expansion in history.
The age of the bulldozer had arrived.
America's wilderness areas were rapidly disappearing.
It began to appear that even the vastness of Alaska's wilderness
would not remain unexploited without some legal protection.
Thoughtful people both in and out of Alaska were concerned.
They considered it a moral imperative that we fight for our national heritage.
It's a bigger question than some have assumed. It involves the real problem of what the human species is to do with the earth.
Attention turned to preserving a still pristine area.
In the northeast corner of Alaska.
Brooks Range?
Here, in the Brooks Range is an area large enough, intact enough to still be considered one of the truly great examples of pristine wilderness. It's an area that embodies an ideal, a place of ecological well-being.
And so the campaign began.
A campaign to preserve
the last great wilderness.
Olaus Murie, an acclaimed field biologist and director of the Wilderness Society, would come to personify this campaign and lead it to victory.
What is needed is an expedition. An expedition to make a detailed and a concentrated study of a relatively small area here in the Brooks Range. It's an area that exemplifies pristine wilderness.
We've already been in the Koyukuk,
On the west side.
and the Old Crow and Porcupine
Over
area.
on the east side,
And other
yes.
scientists have already given good reports.
Over on the northern side of the range.
Mardy Murie would write about that expedition in her book, Two in the Far North.
Two in the far north.
Is the story of the love of two people for one another and their love of wilderness. Both stories intertwined and inseparable. In an interview, Mardy was once asked, "What is your place of enchantment, Mardy?"
The Shinjek, with a ptarmigan sitting on a brow on a hill. Perhaps because it was so practically unknown, that river. It meant something special to everyone connected with it.
Two in the Far North, Part 4, Shinjek.
Shinjek. Shinjek. The Shinjek is the heart of the whole area being proposed for preservation.
And at the same time,
It's the area least visited.
so it had happened.
They were going north again.
The 2-month expedition was funded by the New York Zoological
The
Society,
Conservation
the
Foundation,
Wilderness Society,
And the University of Alaska.
Olaus selected 3 young scientists to accompany him and Mardy on their 1956 Shinjek expedition. Bob Krear,
a doctoral student in zoology who had research experience in Canada and Alaska.
And a close family friend whom Mardy often called her third son.
an experienced filmmaker and photographer, he would visually document the area.
And the group's experience of it.
George Schaller,
a young graduate student just beginning his studies who had written to Olaus 2 years earlier.
Offering to work for no compensation beyond the experience.
and he would assist the others in field study.
And take care of much of the camp work.
Brina Kessel,
A young associate professor at the University of Alaska.
Whom we were meeting for the first time.
she would document the distribution of birds and plants.
And study their ecological relationship to the area's various habitats.
Chapter 1.
Shinjek.
1956, north again.
On this half-overcast, mild first day of June, 1956, Olaus and I
And Dr. Brina Kessel.
Flew by regular air service from Fairbanks to Fort Yukon and were inserted without delay with their baggage into a Cessna 180.
Wheeled landing gear.
The exploratory flights had been made by Keith Harrington, a bush pilot for We and Alaska
He had
Airlines.
flown the two young men of our party up the Shinjek River and landed them
On wheels?
on the ice of one of the lakes.
So far as anyone seemed to know.
This was the first landing on the ice in the Shinjek Valley.
The day had been hazy, but pale blue sky showed ahead of us far to the north. Keith shouted in my ear.
Weather is better ahead. We'll fly straight in.
The brown country,
Partially clothed in the dark green of spruces.
Now with low hills and shallow
and we
valleys.
began to catch glimpses of
The river!
The river of all of our anticipation and planning.
The Shinjek!
The fascinating thing about the view from aloft is that the whole earth north of you seems tilted up.
So that those far mountains are at a level with your plane.
The river seems to flow down in a huge slant.
The top of the slope
Still far off in the distant
It
north.
was a great curve of mountains.
The Brooks Range.
it was getting closer every minute.
All this time, Olaus, sitting on the baggage behind Keith, was watching the country with a serene, untroubled look.
Getting back north again at last!
Suddenly, we came between two sets of hills and saw before us.
A delta-shaped valley.
I took a deep breath and shouted to Keith, "What's this interesting looking place?"
This is where you'll be making your home for a while.
And in what seemed only a moment,
We were circling above a fairly long lake.
climbing a bend of the river.
And there,
On a shelf above the frozen lake,
We saw 3 tents.
immediately, we began to lose altitude. Around we went, making again.
and down.
And suddenly, and as gently as a hawk, we landed.
Onto
The
ice.
wheels crunching merrily along.
Isn't it lovely?
Oh, and that was George!
The tall, warm-blooded one,
Coming out on the ice to meet us.
with his red plaid flannel shirt sleeves rolled to the elbow.
And there was Bob
Oh, with his movie camera on its tripod on the ice.
taking in our arrival. George's first words were,
Brina! 2 ptarmigan nests with 7 eggs already!
That exclamation set the tone for our first few weeks in the Shinjek.
This is where you'll be making your home for a while.
We each snatched some pieces of gear and headed toward shore.
Over the gap.
Between solid ice and shore.
The boys had laid sticks and brush to create a sort of a bridge. And they had done a very good job. And they had been here only 24 hours.
And the tents were already up.
The great second place.
All the supplies under cover.
The 8x10 cook tent.
With the food boxes already in it.
And on either side of that, the other 2 tents.
And Brina's was already going up a little distance away.
The camp was on a fairly level little shelf.
Yeah, they were fairly lucky in that.
Oh, because the land sloped rather steeply above and below.
Oh, and they were delighted to see so much
Oh, and
spruce.
some fairly tall.
It brings life and color and comfort to any landscape.
But they could already tell it was going to be very hard to get camp work done, for just then George shouted,
Grizzlies!
And he and Brina began sprinting
"Across the lake!"
Across the river. 2 of them chasing each other.
They're up a slope on a little yellow grassy swale.
There they played.
2 of them, they were so pale in
They
color.
were very pale in color. Here was a welcome.
Bob's handsome dark brow was puckered with eagerness as he looked out at those 2 faraway bears.
I wish they were closer. I'd go after them.
Glad you're the movie man and not I said. Oh, all I have to do is look at things through my binoculars and enjoy them. Glad not to be responsible for getting them on film. But then there was a meal to think about. I went into the cook tent to see what I could make for dinner. Oh, there were boxes everywhere. Oh, there was everything. It's a good thing I have camp cooked for years of my life.
Nearly half an hour later,
6:30.
dinner was
Over
prepared.
a cheerful fire.
And 1 burner of Brina's Coleman stove.
And we were all happily eating.
Noodles with cream of mushroom soup.
Wieners.
4 apiece.
Connect the bread and jam.
Oh, hot chocolate.
and a candy bar apiece.
We had arrived.
Olaus took out our duffel bag and laid our beds in a little Averlite tent. We were established.
Oh, and it was a fine feeling.
And our sleep was sound that night.
Boom, 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 boom.
Bum, 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 bum.
Part 2.
Chapter 1.
Home to romance.
It is June 1921,
Mardy is 19 years old.
and is having dinner at Jess and Clara Rust's house.
It was nice to be with Clara in the big kitchen
Oh,
again.
to see their 3 girls
To
again?
admire their rosy little son.
Clara was peeling potatoes.
Jess Jr. began to howl.
She said, Mardy, would you fix his bottle, please? Just half milk, half water.
So I had the bottle in my hand when I heard the door slam. And Jess's voice cry out.
Hey, Marty, come here.
In the living room.
Stood a slim, blonde young man. Not handsome in my schoolgirl eyes.
But with the freshest complexion and the bluest eyes.
I switched the bottle from right to left and shook hands.
With Mr. Murie of the Biological Survey.
While the thought raced through my mind.
How could he be a scientist and look so young?
I remember saying,
Your name is Scottish, isn't it?
and Olaus answered.
No, it's Norwegian.
And I remember thinking,
What a pleasant voice
he had.
We walked home together in the rosy northern evening, and all I remember
Is that we agreed we didn't care to live in cities.
he did not say,
When may I see you again?
as all the rest of them did. He was not like any of the rest of them. And it took me a long time to find this out.
But in a few days,
We took a trip upriver in Jess and Clara's motorboat.
and at one place in the quiet waters of Moose Creek, Jess cut the motor. And we heard a great horned owl far off in the forest.
And then Olaus called to him.
Again the owl spoke. A bit closer this time.
Again Olaus hooted.
And so it went. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a dark, soft shape floated into a treetop right above us and sat silhouetted against the golden sky.
And I remember thinking, what kind of magic did this man have? The next morning, the first thing was to have a close look at the river. The
Sheen Jack.
The river was perhaps a good
There was warm and sunny.
The river was close by where some soft mossy hummocks.
On our side, it flowed at the foot of a high sandbank.
Low, bordered by willow.
Muddy.
steady.
Excellent.
Smooth flowing flood.
It made a beautiful wide curve and disappeared from view.
And far upstream,
With the high snow-topped peaks.
Ridge behind ridge.
Summit behind summit. On and on and on.
And you just want to keep going. Up one river, up one pass, and down the next. Whether you're going up a ridge, a mountain, or just a pass, it is always the beyond that keeps me going to the top. Always excited by waiting for that first glimpse on the other side.
In this day and age, it is a rare experience to live in a world wholly nature's own, where the only sounds are those of the natural world.
Here at our lake, all sounds were truly charming.
Nearly always a little breeze was whispering
Between the small, scattered white spruces.
On the mossy hillsides.
There was the splash of a muskrat diving off the edge of the ice.
Ptarmigan were crowing.
Clicking, talking, calling all around us.
Oh, tree sparrows sang continually.
Their voices were almost a constant background to all the other sounds. And sometimes we heard the scolding chatter of the brewer's blackbird, and what seemed a little strange to us up here in the north,
The voice of the robin.
Our close friend.
Of all the mild domesticated places.
These were the voices on the hillside around camp. And from out on the lake, as the ice receded from the shore more each day, and the days were warm and never darkening, we heard other sounds that were equally charming and exciting.
far across the land, we sometimes heard
the indescribably haunting call of the Arctic loon.
those beautiful patricians of the north.
You sound so lonesome. Is he looking for something?
No, that's just his call.
He sounds like I would feel like sounding if I lost you and couldn't find you. From the diary, June 3rd. As I sit on this mossy slope above camp writing, the three young scientists are beside themselves with all there is
To see and do.
And record.
I stood behind a clump of spruce trees, and this beautiful bull caribou with a great set of antlers came right by, and I got 2 pictures before he even heard the camera.
The tree sparrow is singing.
The wind soughing through the 30-foot-tall spruce.
I found a sandpiper nest, and the female stayed right around me making little sounds and getting back on her eggs right there within 5 feet of me while I kept right on taking pictures.
Some unknown bird is clucking and talking away in the distance.
There were no other sounds but the sounds of the land itself.
I got movies of a crossfox, perhaps the same one we heard the other night. It was galloping and trotting clear across the flat right in front of me.
The peace and vastness of the Arctic are haunting. A great trio they are. Olaus has just come back from a short hike to the east end of the lake and is now going over to the river, saluting me smilingly as he passed and calling up to me,
It's nice, Mardy!
Our lives consisted of little episodes like this, and we were all completely absorbed in them. The sights and sounds of our days and our daylight nights were not of our making or doing. We were the visiting observers of spring in the Arctic's natural world, trying to be as unobtrusive as possible. Olaus and the 3 young scientists tried as much as possible not to disturb the natural world. Olaus wore his pack sack like a part of his anatomy as he tramped the tundra and enjoyed the flight and song of birds and every flower that grew. He was also ever alert for a track or a scat, and out of it all, by the end of the summer, came an important ecological conclusion.
Why were we here? That is a question that we all ask ourselves as those weeks of summer went by. And it's a mission that cannot be readily explained. So we were asked to come here to look into the character of the Brooks Range. And here we were, beside an unnamed lake, at a camp more than 150 miles north of the Arctic Circle. You know, perhaps George Schaller said it best that very first day when he ran out to meet us on the lake ice, and he said,
This is a wonderful place. I want to stay up here.
why? Why? That is what we were here to try and find out. In later years, Brina Kessel would go on to become Alaska's leading ornithologist, and then Bob Krear would become a professor of biology and a noted park naturalist. And George Schaller would become one of the world's leading conservation biologists. And my wife, Mardy, would go on to become a published author and a key figure in the conservation movement. So, I've given the venture much thought. So, here is an area of the North at stake. It's a symbol of the whole circumpolar Arctic. So, what should mankind do with it? We discussed vaguely amongst ourselves, and all I could say to those three beautiful young people was this: the success of this expedition will be judged, will be measured by what each one of you gets out of his experiences up here.
And that was our assignment. I want you to get the best you can out of your experience here this summer.
An experience of peace that can only come by being totally isolated from what was going on in the world, by being surrounded by that great, pristine Arctic beauty.
Olaus said that our purpose was twofold. Not only to study the natural history of the area, but also to gather impressions of the precious, intangible values, as he phrased it. All this in the hopes that this knowledge would lead to the establishment of the Arctic Refuge.
It was easy here to forget the world of man and relax into this world of nature. It was a world that compelled all of our interest and concentration and put everything else out of mind. As we walked the tundra, our attention was completely held
by the achievements of the composition of moss,
Lichens,
small plants,
And bright flowers.
Yet we were ever alert to identify every bird.
and note evidence of bear, moss and roots dug up, and tracks by the edges of pools.
And since our way was always led by the river or one of the many lakes, we were always identifying shorebirds.
Ducks.
Grebes.
gulls,
Loons.
How could we be anything but absorbed? Our lake, by far the largest in the region, was the richest in animal activity.
On those days when we did stay in camp to write in our journals,
put up specimens,
Or perform camp chores.
The animal world still claimed us. One afternoon, Bob was sitting just below camp watching the performance of 3 muskrats.
I'd gone down to the edge of the lake, just in front of camp, to witness the activities of 3 muskrats feeding and fighting near the edge of the ice. I must have been sitting there for about half an hour when one of the muskrats dove off the edge of the ice, quickly followed by the other 2. Their behavior suggested they had been frightened by something. I know it was not me, for I had been sitting there for about half an hour, offering no threat to them. I heard a slight rustle behind me, and turned my head slowly to look right into the eyes of a large, gray Arctic wolf standing about 15 feet away. I had been hoping to have some contact with wolves, but I never dared hope one would walk right into camp. I did not know who was more surprised, the wolf or me. We gazed into each other's eyes for a moment or two while I remained motionless. The wolf then turned with what appeared to me as surprising dignity under the circumstances, and without even looking back, returned the way it had come and out of sight. Mardy, Olaus, Brina, come quickly, a wolf! We all rushed out.
And stood in trance.
watching our first wolf
Go unhurriedly to the far shore.
The lake we were on had no name. So in honor of the wolf that came to visit us that day, we decided to call it...
By common consent, Lobo Lake.
Lobo Lake!
Years later, at age 87, when Bob Krear was interviewed, he was asked what memory lingered most in his mind on that 1956 Shinjek expedition. And he said,
There are two. The two close encounters with the grizzlies, and seeing the wolf that day at Lobo Lake. It was wonderful. He looked at me. He wasn't afraid. And I wasn't afraid.
and then with a chuckle he said,
Maybe he sensed
a
kindred spirit.
From the diary, the first week of June in the Arctic must be the most exciting time of the year.
Dwarf willow!
Heather!
Rainey-Berry!
Ooh, all sorts of alpine blossoms came into bud, into leaf, into flowers so quickly we were bewildered.
The botanists could hardly keep up with the show.
On June 5th, George decided to take a trip to the north shoulder of Table Mountain.
The one named Mount.
East of Lobo.
We called the shoulder
The Ridge.
George came striding across the ice at 6 o'clock.
After a long day of hiking and climbing.
With nothing but a pocket full of raisins.
Oh, what a country. Those clear mountain streams and those slopes just full of flowers and those valleys. And so on top, the mountains, they just go on and on and on. You just want to keep going up one ridge and down another.
George proceeded to empty onto the moss.
A gorgeous assortment of alpine flowers.
These had to be sorted out, each laid carefully on the plant press paper of blood, and then each page labeled.
2 days later at breakfast, Olaus announced that he too wanted to go over to the mountain, to the foot of the ridge.
They all looked at one another. Here was something I had hoped would not come up just yet.
Just a year before.
Olaus had been a patient in a hospital in Denver.
About to be discharged after 13 months.
And miraculous recovery from tuberculosis and meningitis.
Our expedition had been delayed 2 years because of this.
The young folks and I had discussed going up the ridge for a day.
But we had agreed we should wait a while.
As we thought perhaps Olaus shouldn't climb much yet.
So, the next morning,
I said, okay. Now I'll go with you, but only if we're going to the mountain. Then another day we'll climb up to where George did. So what happened? After 31 years of marriage, I should have known. We went to the top, of course. And Olaus wasn't as winded as I was. He even went on over the top a little ways.
to see what was on the other side.
On top, across a carpet of mountain avens,
Heather.
Dwarf willow.
and dozens of other lovely small plants, a balmy breeze blew.
The sun was high and blazing.
I lay flat on the moss and heather, hat over my face, and felt absolute content. Here I was, privileged to lie on top of a mountain in the Arctic. Through half-closed eyes, I looked across the valley. The mountains made an unearthly, beautiful frieze against the blue. Numberless, snowy, streaked with dark rocks, various in shape, shoulders, domes, spires, and castles.
Sheep shoulders, spirals,
Shapes. The Shinjek. I know nothing of painting, but I felt for a moment the urge a painter must experience, to brush great strokes of brown and fawn, purple, gray, and silver upon canvas. Gazing at such a scene through half-closed eyes on a mountaintop strikes through to your inmost heart. place. The scene, the breeze, the fragrance, the bird song, the flowers and mosses all blend into one clear entity. One jewel. It is the Arctic in its unbelievably accelerated summer life. It is also the personal well-being purchased by striving, by lifting and setting down your legs over and over, through the muskeg, up the slope, gaining the summit, man using himself. Oh, it is surely what John Muir meant when he said, climb the mountains and get their glad tidings. When Olaus returned from his little look at the other side,
We stood.
and took a long look before starting back down.
The mountain world here just seems to multiply itself. Mountain and valley, mountain and valley, mountain and valley, all just emptying right into the Shinjek.
Each valley makes me wonder what is at the head of it.
What was on the other side?
Climb the mountains and get their good tidings. Nature's peace will flow into you as sunshine flows into trees. The wind will blow its own freshness into you, and the storms, their energy and cares will fall like autumn leaves.
Lying in the tent that night, we listened to the sounds of Lobo. Tree sparrow. A sweet cascade of notes.
White crest. Questioning and plaintive.
But strong. And from out on the lake, the loons.
This was their world.
We were the fortunate visitors.
Boom, 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 boom.
Dum, 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 dum.
Part 2.
Chapter 1.
Home to romance.
The year is 1923.
Mardy is 21 years old.
Olaus was about to depart.
To continue his caribou research in the Brooks Range.
Mardy was staying in
To
Fairbanks.
complete her final year at the University of Alaska.
Nothing was conventional about this romance in any sense.
So we both knew there was no life for us except together.
And yet we were faced with what seemed like an impossible situation.
One evening,
When we were in the front parlor,
with Mother,
And Daddy.
trying to make plans,
And when I had finally said,
half in tears.
I don't think you're going to have time to stop and get married this summer.
Olaus had replied in his soothing voice.
Now, look. So your birthday is on August the 18th? Let's take a chance on that date. And I don't know, but gosh, I should be able to get downriver by that time. Well, like, I'll have to get downriver by that time because the Koyukuk freezes up. Okay, let's take a chance on that day. We'll get married in Anvik at the Episcopal Mission, and then whatever riverboat you come downriver on, we'll take to Nolado, and then we'll change to the Teddy 8, so the Sternville steamer, and then we'll take that back up to the... It's the best I can think of. I talked to the chief of the biological survey. And I told him that you were coming with me.
He then paused and leaned over with a rather questioning smile.
You do want to go, don't you?
Mother and Daddy sat looking first at Olaus,
Then at me,
rather dubiously.
rather puzzled.
But I looked at Olaus, and there was no question.
Yes. Yes, I want to go.
Part 2.
Chapter 2.
Anvik.
It is 1 year later.
August 18th, 1924.
Mardy's birthday and her wedding day.
The charming chief engineer looked through the window wanting to know
how it felt to have so much faith in one man that you would travel 800 miles with a whole wedding party when you had hardly heard from the man in 3 months.
They did all of this joking, I know, to hide their deep, friendly concern.
To help me pretend waiting was bearable.
To reassure me that the gas boat from St. Michael had not hit a snag.
That it would come.
That there would be a bridegroom on it.
We sat waiting 24 hours.
At 8 o'clock that evening, my birthday, we were all in the pilot house as usual.
Everyone making forced,
unconcerned remark.
When in the middle of a sentence, the captain shouted,
"Gas boat! Coming up!"
"There's Olaus, I see
him!" Alone in the stateroom, I listened to the shouts of greeting and tried to make myself realize what this moment was. But all I could think about was how loud my heart was pounding. Then the door opened quietly. Oh! And we were together, and there was no thinking.
It's 3 o'clock in the morning.
I suppose the most unusual thing about this wedding was the hour at which it was held.
3 a.m. in the morning.
we walked up the riverbank,
under the glow of light,
strung miraculously
From ship to shore.
Oh, and then we came upon a little log church.
The light showed its sturdy outline,
Oh, the rustic steeple.
its tiny windows.
What a comfortable quiet there was about it.
We stepped over the threshold into the soft yellow light.
Candles shone on bowls of ferns at the altar.
And pale gold Arctic poppies,
It was a dream.
pausing but an hour in the night.
And finding all this beauty prepared for us.
A mass of Arctic poppies was put in my arms.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered today in this company to join together Olaus Johann Murie and Margaret Elizabeth Thomas in holy matrimony.
And while I was trying to realize the perfection of this hour, we were going on. Oh, what greater joy could life ever hold than to repeat those words with a sure heart? I, Margaret, take thee, Olaus.
And with that, we stood close by one another on the shore
And watched the dear faces grow dimmer and dimmer in the mist.
And as we waved
The wedding ship sounded its last salute to us.
and turned around the bend in the rain,
Leaving us to start the first chapter of our life together.
our honeymoon.
In the wilderness!
Just keep right on dancing forever, dear, with you. Boom, boom, boom. June 1956, Sheen Deck.
Up the valley.
Olaus decided it was time that we go up to the head of the river.
We wanted to get further into the mountains.
So in late June,
we moved upriver.
To a lake only 18 miles north of Lobo.
Everyone felt like it was worth the move.
To be really in the mountains.
One day closer to the divide.
and with Brina in a good position to reach the plots she was to set up. This was the last lake in the valley.
Deep enough and long
To
enough.
land a plane on.
This lake, like most others, had no name.
And given its northernmost location,
We decided to call it Last Lake.
Last
Lake. From the diary, July 8th.
George and Olaus decided that they were going to discuss the route that George was going to take on his backpack trip.
If George makes this trip,
It will mean that our party will pretty well cover this entire middle area of the region.
this is the area.
We all hope.
Would become the Arctic refuge.
George will be photographing and taking notes on the topography of the land at the head of the Sheen.
While at the same time taking any note of any mountain sheep
And caribou and wolves.
And observing the bird life.
Olaus had a strong belief that valuable scientific data are accumulated on the ground.
Afoot.
With eyes and ears alert!
Notebook and camera ready.
And in George, Olaus had an earnest disciple. July 16th. All that day we lived in a terrific tearing wind, the most dramatic moving pageant of clouds of every description, rolling across the valley, pouring over the peaks, sailing into the passes to the colline, and then finally, toward evening, the sky was all blue and bright again.
I cross a divide to the west and then descend to the east fork of the Schaller River. There, I unroll my sleeping bag on a gravel bar. Dinner consists of crackers, raisins, and a cup of cold water. I am too weary to make a fire to cook, but I am filled with the contentment that comes from achievement and exhaustion.
Before dinner, I climbed the slope on the mountain behind camp and stood and searched the whole visible world. I especially searched the western landscape, for Olaus was certain that all the caribou had been somewhere to the west all this time, having their calves. White caps still dotted our lake, but the landscape was quiet. Nothing moved except one of our gulls, startlingly white against the blue sky. After the wind, everything seemed breathlessly still, as though we were all waiting for something.
At 5 a.m., there was this noise, like the sound of water rushing over gravel or crashing brush, all mixed into one confusion with the vibration of the ground. It made me stand up in my bag.
After dinner, while we were all doing camp chores, we all suddenly stopped and looked at one another. We were conscious of a strange sound coming from the river.
Surely there couldn't be a cat train way up here.
Oh, what a horrible thought.
Well, it sounds just like a freight train coming along in the distance.
Do you think it could be some wind still kicking around in one of those canyons over there?
I just don't know.
I was about to go into the tent to read in comfort.
When Bob and I heard a strange faraway sound
Like the low hoot of an owl blurred by
and a
distance.
screen of gull cries in the foreground.
I'm going to go over their way and see what it is. It must be some owl of some kind.
Just then Bob called to me.
Mardy, are your glasses here? There's something over on the flat by the river. Big bunch. Boy, are they kicking up dust. Yes, it is. Caribou. Caribou!
Caribou! They poured from the valley I had come. They flowed through the brush like a mass of brown lava and covered the gravel ball. There they spread out. This mass elongated to form one long line. This line passed by my bag some 60 feet, one caribou after the next. They went down the riverbank, up the other side, and up on down the bar as far as the eye could see. In the distance, they disappeared into more brush.
There was a wild scramble now.
Bob getting his camera and going off on the run.
Brina! Brina, come on! Caribou!
He was running across the tussocks, snatched her camera from the tent.
And then we both went running over the open tundra. There was Olaus calling out to me.
My camera! My camera!
Back I got over the tussocks, grabbed the camera in the left ear and went running, and kept running because Olaus
Was running as fast as he could up to the top of the hill slope.
Well, the great herd had covered the flat, and the sounds they were making were fantastic.
Brina, Olaus and I kept going uphill.
Because Olaus was trying to get a Bob for a better look.
And suddenly they collapsed on a high slope on the grass.
And settled down to look and listen.
Not one caribou saw me in the cove as I lay in my bag, watching, counting, marveling at this momentous sight. They were moving steadily along now, a mass of dark brown figures, Cows, bulls, yearlings, calves, every combination of coloring, all bathed in the bright golden light of this Arctic night.
The quiet, unmoving landscape I had scanned from the ridge so carefully before dinner had come alive. Oh, the rightful owners had returned.
Their thousands of hooves churning through the water and gravel had been the mysterious train we heard and puzzled over.
They made a permeating rumble, almost a roar, not to be likened to anything else I can think
The
of.
total effect of sight, of sound, the movement of these thousands of animals. The clear western golden sky gave one a feeling of being a privileged onlooker at a rare performance. A performance in nature's own way, in the setting of countless ages. Ages before man. I suppose each one of my companions had their own individual impressions of this scene, but for myself, my chief pleasure was seeing the delight of my companions. Bob, striding across those tussock flats with efficient determination with his movie camera and his tripod, and Brina also with equal speed, intent on the prospect of seeing such a herd, spurred on also by her scientific zeal, which is what brought her here in the first place. And when I called to Mardy to bring me my camera and light meter, I shall never forget the breathless enthusiasm that she hastened to me, extending to me my camera.
250.
Brian and Olaus are trying to count now.
650.
700.
Between 5 and 5:30, 750 caribou.
800.
1,000.
Between 6 and 6:30, 500 more.
Calves ran here
We were
and
happy
there.
to see
In dark summer
Some still in
coats.
faded winter coats.
Great antlers looking black.
And the
against
herd
green
just seemed to
sun.
Olaus with
stretch
marvelous,
on
gigantic
the
antlers.
Caribou's pace was hectic, pushing, and pushing.
Something in some valley west of here had called them together. This 1,600 strong herd of talking, grunting pilgrims. They knew the way. And they had a goal. And they were not stopping.
This is the culmination of all the good things the river and mountains had already shown us. Here was the living, moving, warm-blooded life of the Arctic. Out of some far valley to the west of this region, into some far valley to the east, with the wisdom of the ages. Always moving, needing all of these mountains and valleys in which to live. A cold breeze came on the slope.
Look how beautiful this all is. This is something I want to always remember.
How wonderful.
This is terrific. This makes it.
It was past 10 p.m.
We all knew we best go back and get some sleep.
We didn't want to.
It was a scene we wanted to watch for hours.
I hope they can always have this country to travel back and forth in.
July 19th, as we were all busily getting ready for dinner.
There was George!
Between the tents.
Looking a bit thinner.
Well, and with a happy smile on his face.
The soles of his tennis shoes,
Tied with strain over his rubber pack sole.
where they'd come undone for their leather tops.
Other than that,
All was well.
And we were delighted to have him back.
A day earlier than planned.
The caribou, one group of about 150, catching the scent of my bag, which I had laid down, came thundering right at me. And at the last moment, saw me and veered off.
Olaus and I have been planning a 5-day backpack trip to the head of the Shinjek. And now, we could leave with free minds.
this would be their first time since their honeymoon in the Brooks Range.
The two of them, alone together, sliding along on top of the world.
We all knew about the romantic wilderness honeymoon.
Just the two of them traveling together by dog sled in the Arctic.
Some 550 miles following the caribou in sub-zero weather.
In one of the most remote regions of the far north.
We knew to be off again alone with each other would bring back precious memories of that time 31 years ago.
July 20th.
It was a sunny, cloudless day.
Olaus and I set out.
To the head of the Schaller Valley, with all of our wonderful young people taking pictures of us as we left.
We all understood, and were happy to see them off.
The river, sparkling clear.
Another ice floe.
On the opposite edge stood a beautiful bull caribou.
We hoped to get close enough for a picture.
Climbing up.
Climbing down.
Climbing up.
Climbing down.
Wading shallow streams.
Climbing up. Climbing down. Wading shallow streams. Climbing up. Climbing down. Wading shallow streams. Climbing up. Climbing down. Wading shallow streams. Climbing up. Climbing down.
Wading shallow streams.
They fell time and again.
Tussocks. Get up again.
Step up.
Get up again.
Step up.
Teeter along. Get up again. Step up.
Teeter along.
Get up again. Step up. Teeter
Teeter
along.
along. Get up again. Step up.
Teeter along. Get up again. Step up. Teeter along.
No way out but to go on.
After all, that is what we all do when we have to. I'm not unhappy. I guess it's just that the spirit is willing, oh, but the flesh is weak. I just can't seem to keep back these pesky tears.
Hey, I know. I felt like crying myself a few times back there. But I found a place for us to camp for the night, and I promise that we will not take the same route downriver. All things come to an end.
Even tussocks in the Arctic.
Wonderful peace.
Not a sound in the world.
Except the faint singing of the river.
Bohemian waxwings.
Two ptarmigan.
One shrike.
Many semi-palmated plovers.
Sandpipers.
Two pigeon hawks. A new addition to our bird list.
And then they were asleep.
July 21st. Ice thick on the water.
Face up to the blessed sun.
I remember once saying to Olaus on our dog sled honeymoon, "Whatever made you think I could do all of this?" He looked at me and he said, "Oh, I knew you could."
Strike the match.
The great horned owl hoots nearby.
The whisper of kindling starting.
The crackle of the fire. Olaus looks up. He still has the bluest eyes and the nicest smile.
From the diary, July 22nd. This was to be our day to get as close to the head of the river as possible.
Heavenly
Clear.
and warm Indian summer. Following the river,
Watchful stepping.
Olaus found a wolf track.
This was our farthest north. A perfect day we shall always cherish. The caribou had gone east apparently, but all along we walked centuries-old trails.
Bare talus.
Oh, wonderful walking.
Gradual slopes.
Rye moss.
Oh, alpine flowers.
Oh, flitting longspurs. On a knoll, from which we had a long, far-reaching view to the top of the crest
And
of the
what
ridge.
we knew must be the head of the river.
We stood and took a long look.
Oh, and at the head of the valley.
Northeast from us
High in the sky, it seemed.
were those snow-covered peaks.
With glaciers in the sides of them.
These must be the glaciers George
Out
mentioned.
of one of these flows the Shinjek.
Here was the beginning of our river.
We were high above the limits of trees.
And over there,
The summit of
the Brooks Range, our farthest north.
And our last time to see it.
For this trip,
It's beautiful.
how quiet.
How blessedly itself.
Olaus is looking at the other side of the river.
I wish I had more time to explore. I don't think I've ever left a place with so much reluctance in all my life.
Then he turned and smiled at me.
I know I should be grateful that I've been here and I've seen this much.
"7 years later, Olaus died, but not before his dream was realized in December 1960 with the establishment of the Arctic Refuge.
Days on the trail taught us that there is always and forever
Something to rejoice about.
July 23rd.
Homeward bound,
Last lake.
Packs lighter.
Still the cloudless blue and gold weather.
The river pouring its crystal flood over rocks of blue-green color and a texture like jade.
beautiful view.
Our last camp.
Olaus sits below me on the slope, drawing an Arctic poppy. Our flower.
It's 8 o'clock in the morning. We pass the home light room.
This was their last camp on the way back.
They spread out their sleeping bags on the banks of the main river,
In the edge of a long grove of spruce.
and there from those beds watched a most unforgettable scene.
As the sun cast a red-gold reflection.
Over the water of the Shinjek.
You know, Marty, we're gonna miss this.
I could just keep right on dancing forever. Dear wife,
August 7th.
Our last day.
The next day, Olaus dropped the tent, all rolled up on a growing pile of bundles by the shore. I looked at the package and a feeling of finality flooded through me. All the comfort and protection of the past few weeks, all rolled up into a little green bundle. From the shore, Bob called to us.
You folks noticed something different about camp today?
The fog had lifted.
Doesn't it seem quieter somehow? The gulls are gone. All three of them.
Well, then I guess it's time for us to be leaving too. But, gee, I hate to leave this country.
we all turned to go back to the work of packing again,
And saw Olaus.
with 2 old gas cans in his hands.
Tramping across toward the talus slope at the base of Camp Mountain.
He was burying the last vestige of our camp here.
But more than that, I knew he was going for one last look.
At that slope,
That old eagle
The
nest,
lichens and the mosses.
plants and seed,
the sweep of
The
tundra,
forest to the north.
the free
The
land.
home of the free creatures.
One last look.
one last look.
One last look.
One last look at his beloved art. I turned and looked through tears at Last Lake. And suddenly realized something else. Bob? Are the loons gone too?
Two in the far north is the story of the love of 2 people for one another and their love of wilderness. Both stories intertwined and inseparable. Mardy survived Olaus by many years and dedicated her life to the ongoing protection of wilderness. On the last page of her now classic book, Mardy expresses her deepest hope for the present and future of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. She leaves us with these words.
What can I say that can express what Alaska can mean to us all? When I think about the part of Alaska that has meant so much in my life, the overpowering and magnificent fact is that Lobo Lake is still there, untouched. That Last Lake
Still there.
is still there, untouched. That the tundra, the mountains, the unmarked places, the quiet, the land itself are all still there. Do I dare to believe that one day one of my great-grandchildren could journey to the Shinjek and see a wolf trotting across Lobo Lake?